Now, workers in the United States are quitting their jobs in unprecedented numbers. New figures show that a record 4.5 million people left their positions in November. Now, it's part of a phenomenon that's really been dubbed the Great Resignation. And our business editor Stephen Carroll is here to tell us more about it. Stephen, what do these latest numbers then from the US tell us?
It tells the jobs market is still in turmoil after the pandemic. That 4.5 million figure represents 3% of the American workforce, all quitting their jobs in just 1 month. And those figures have been higher than usual for some time now, as we can see on that graph. You saw a big drop in people leaving their jobs during the first lockdown at the start of 2020. But as soon as the economy opened up, since kind of early last year, we've seen significantly higher than usual numbers of people leaving their jobs. A regular month, based on the past sort of 10 years, is about 3.5 million people moving. Now we're talking about something that's significantly higher than that. The other side of this is the number of jobs on offer has also increased. At the end of November, there were 10.6 million job openings in the United States. Private sector surveys say that that could have risen as high as 12 million by the end of December. There are just under 7 million people looking for work, so that means there are about 2 workers for every 3 job openings. And overall participation in the labour market in the US, that's those working and those available to work, is still well below pre-pandemic levels.
Obvious second question then, just why?
Well, look, there's a whole host of reasons for it. We know that people have been reassessing their priorities after the pandemic as well. In general, people changing their jobs is seen as a sign of a strong economy. There's jobs on offers. People are able to move to get higher wages or better working conditions. The figures show us that the biggest turnover are in lower paid sectors. Hospitality and leisure seeing record numbers of people quitting. Healthcare as well, seeing the highest quit rate since 2000. A shortage of workers has meant that employers have had to improve their offers for those trying to attract employment, so higher wages, better conditions, as we were talking about. That's driving some change as well. People see that arrivals paying more, so they're going to change job too. Of course, rising inflation plays into this as well. Price rises, consumer price rises in the US at their highest level in over 40 years at the end of last year, almost 7%. Wages are rising on average by about 4%. So people are going to be moving around to try and get more money as well. There are also the issue of people who haven't returned to the workforce since the pandemic struck, people who have childcare issues, people who might have health issues and they're unable to go back to work because they're afraid of catching COVID-19. That's something that's disproportionately affecting women, and we know that female participation in the labour force hasn't recovered in the same way. There's also those who just chose to retire early when the pandemic happened.
And what about the rest of the world? Is this just the US or does it apply elsewhere too?
Look, we know people in lots of parts of the world have been reassessing their priorities in the wake of everything that's happened in the past 2 years. But the situation is particularly acute in the United States. Part of that is down to the way the labour market works in the US. There's less job security. The social safety net doesn't provide the same sort of level of protection that we see in other parts of the world. In Europe, for example, the unemployment rate is almost back at pre-pandemic levels. So we're in places where there were government furlough schemes that kept people on the payroll during those first lockdowns, that the state was paying wages to people. That meant that they had a link to a job to go back to rather than having lost their jobs and having to look for something new. So that also affects the turnover rate. In France, for example, labour force participation is now actually at a record high after things have been able to open up last year. That's being helped by the government's €100 billion recovery plan as well, which is favouring investment and in turn creating jobs too. There are still labour shortage issues in France. Hospitality is one we've heard a lot about. Some of those issues predate the pandemic as well. And it's true in countries like France that people aren't able to cash in their retirement funds early and retire early in the same way that they might be able to do in the United States. So some people are still interested in changing jobs, but the factors driving it and the extent of it is quite different depending on where you are.
Interesting look at the picture right around the world. Thank you very much, Stephen Carroll, from our business desk there, our business editor.